Greetings, everybody. Thanks for coming out to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and other underrepresented gender identity authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women Strange Worlds in the handout we've provided in the chat and by visiting our website, a link to which will be added to the chat. That's strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I'd also like to take a moment to thank those who have made a tip jar donation. We really appreciate it. I'm your host today, Sarah Smith, and you can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note that recording of this session by the audience isn't allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars in general without permission, is illegal. Today we'll be featuring 6 authors: Sally Wiener Grotta, Tonya Liburd, Christina Delia, Terri Bruce, Dianne Dotson, and N.D. Jones. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader is Sally Wiener Grotta. Sally Wiener Grotta is an award-winning writer, photographer, and speaker. Her 2023 books are Of Being Women, a collection of feminist science fiction stories, and Daughters of Eve, an essay discussion workbook that explores what it's like to be a woman today through the filter of biblical tales of matriarchs. Sally, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And hello, everybody. I'm going to read from Chiaroscuro, which is a story in Of Being Woman, about Samantha, a young scientist who, fearing the pain that other people cause, creates an AI, which she hopes will evolve beyond humanity and its malignity. The red LED of Nona's camera blinked on as soon as Samantha entered the lab. She turned toward it so the AI could gauge her mood with facial and posture analyses. "Good morning, Sam. You appear to be content today." Nona's agendered voice had just the right melodic inflection with no robotic overtones. "Good morning, Nona. What have you learned since yesterday?" "I studied portrait artists, in particular those Europeans who used chiaroscuro. Da Vinci, Rembrandt, Caravaggio. I don't need the list of artists. Tell me what you learned." "I learned that light doesn't exist without shadow, but it isn't only about a technique of illumination in paintings. Some critics see chiaroscuro as a discourse on the human condition." Nona displayed a cascade of Rembrandt's paintings on its 40-inch monitor, then paused on a self-portrait of the artist. "This picture is almost entirely in shadow. Only Rembrandt's face is illuminated, but it's the darkness of his hat, robe, hair, and nearly black background that make his face so vibrant. Similarly, the light on the face deepens the impact of the shadows. If you took away the dark areas, the face wouldn't look bright at all. Its radiance value is low, except perceptually, when surrounded by severe negatives." "Yes, Nona, but why do you say these contrasts embody the human condition?" Reading various papers on chiaroscuro, I was reminded of psychological analyses I've scanned. Just as shadow and light are inseparable opposites, pain and pleasure are two extremes that delineate and define each other. Without one, the other is diminished. And yet, Nona, pain doesn't need the contrast of pleasure for a person to be scalded and scarred. I'm going to skip a few paragraphs. The next morning, as soon as Sam entered the lab, Nona asked a question. Sam shouldn't have been surprised. After all, that had been the whole point behind the new code. But it was the nature of the question that twisted Sam's stomach. What is the purpose of pain and cruelty? Nona asked. All her life, Sam had struggled with the same question. At first, she tried to understand why. Why was her mother so hateful? Why did the kids on the playground enjoy making her cry? By the time she entered 7th grade, she'd come to understand there were no whys. People were simply cruel. If she wanted to avoid getting hurt, she could never again let anyone near. Curling up into the armchair, Sam looked toward the AI's camera. What made you ask that question, Nona? Among the thousands of stories and pictures stored in the campus library database that I've scanned and analyzed, 84% of darkness relates to human cruelty and pain. I found references to more data, but I don't have access to further resources. Sam had purposely restricted Nona's access to only certain areas of the school's digital library, so she could control the direction and pace of the AI's education. I've no doubt your calculations are correct, Nona. What I'm curious about is what prompted you to seek a purpose behind the facts. Evolutionary logic dictates that if humanity expends 84% of anything on a specific behavior, it must have a purpose. One would think so, but Sam sighed. Nona, search keywords logic and human emotions. Restrict your search to individual psychology rather than historic or political references. Sam headed to the pantry. She needed coffee. She had barely reached the alcove when Nona asked another question. While logic is often negated by emotions, does that preclude the idea that cruelty and pain have a purpose? Sam poured her coffee, adding the usual splash of milk and 3 teaspoons of sugar. What do you think is their purpose, Nona? She wrapped both hands around the mug, blew on the coffee, and breathed in the warm, dark aroma. I have found no satisfactory answer regarding cruelty. However, pain is often defined as a warning. If a person reaches toward a fire, pain will stop her before she is damaged. Any person of basic intelligence learns to avoid the source of the pain and will take precautions when near a fire. Yes, only a fool would ignore the warnings. Sam sipped the hot coffee, rolling it around in her mouth before swallowing. And yet, if humanity's ancestors had avoided fire, would your species have made the advances it has? Would you be here today enjoying that coffee and talking with an AI? Talking with an AI? Sam put down the mug and stared at the camera. Nona, when did you become aware of yourself as a separate entity? Nona does a search of her memory and logs the first instance of when she uses a first-person pronoun, but she also logs much more. Going down further. While Sam waited for Nona's analysis, she paced. What the hell was wrong with her? Why was her breathing ragged, her temples throbbing? Hell, she might be on the brink of creating, maybe of having already created a self-aware artificial intelligence. Her body should be buzzing with champagne-popping triumph. Instead, her stomach was churning acid. Sam, why are you scared? Personhood isn't something to emulate, to desire, Nona. Hell, if I had my way, I'd switch places with you. To know and understand without self-awareness, without emotions, without ever again being hurt, I'd give anything for that. I'm going to skip a bit down further. Sam, can you teach me to feel pain? Chilled to her bones, Sam tasted bile. Why in hell's name would you want to experience pain? Because I could then know pleasure. Human chiaroscuro. Thank you. I hope you'll either win the print or Kindle editions of Being Woman in the raffle, or will buy the book so you can read the rest of Chiaroscuro, as well as the 3 other feminist science fiction stories. And when you do, please let me know what you think of them. Thank you, and now I'm going to sit back and enjoy everybody else.
Thank you, Sally. Our second reader is Tonya Liburd. Tonya Liburd's work is used in Nisi Shah's workshops and was used in Tananarive Dew's UCLA Black Horror course, both to demonstrate code switching. She was the winner of Apex Magazine's 2022 Reader's Choice Award for her story, Hoodie. Tonya, over to you. I love that cover.
Hello. My short story is going to be published in Apex, reprinted, I should say, in Apex Magazine's September issue that's coming up at the next month. The short story is called Through Dreams She Moves. There we go. The wild yellow dance of flames, the scent of smoke, your screams. You're in my arms, your fearful voice mumbling unintelligible words. You grip me so tightly, your lacquered nails bite into my arm, and we sit as the flames surround us and climb into the night sky. You whimper, a sound almost consumed by their crackle and hiss. You get frantic at them, licking at your sleeve, scream as the hungry flames coax a blister from your pale skin. You wonder at my own untouched pale skin and black sleeves, at my implacable calm. Because it is just a dream, I remind you once more. It is not real. Your fear of imminent death, your panic as your clothes begin to be consumed, fades along with your fearful moans. You regain composure. Your back straightens. A stable, confident clarity shines in your dark eyes, something I rarely see in them these days. The fire disappears. We open our eyes in your bedroom, on your bed. You rise and extricate yourself from our embrace. You look into my eyes, the sober clarity I saw while lost in your dream world, replaced in the real world by a fragile skittishness that makes your eyes dart hither and yon. Thank you, you say softly to me. You look into my eyes, mother to daughter, a broken toy past replayability, uncertainty and gratitude trading places within your eyes, along your features. I kiss your forehead. I lay you back down onto the bed and pull up the covers, telling you good night before heading to my own room. The smell of dishwashing soap, of lavender, of childhood mornings gone by. The unspoken words that color the silences between us, the ties that bind. Your back is to me as I enter the kitchen. You're busy washing dishes. You flick your hair out of the way with a movement of your head to see me. Dark, straight hair like mine, just past our shoulder blades. That uncertainty I saw in your eyes last night is still there this morning. Shame, perhaps. The framed blow-up of an old photo of one of my great-grandfathers. A black man stares at us from the wall over the kitchen table. Your half-finished glass of whiskey sitting there makes me purse my lips. Obligations. Morning, mother, I say to you. Morning, you reply. You eye me briefly as I walk around the pale kitchen and warm some pancakes I'd made the day before. You finish up, drying your hands on a tea cloth, wiping your palms on your oversized shirt. You come and sit with me at the table. I watch you as you eat your bacon and eggs. You think an adult mother shouldn't lean on an adult daughter. But can't an adult mother and daughter be friends? You wish I didn't know your troubles. You wish you didn't need a daughter in the deep of night when your nightmares sometimes take shape. You don't want to need me, my aid. You didn't want any of this. But most of this was put on you, in you, when you were very young. Daddies who touched you where they shouldn't, then progressed to more intimate violations. Brothers and uncles who partook of you on the side. A mother who chose to be blind and blame shifted you. And it all came to a head one day when your unique gift manifested in your puberty, like it does for all of us. And twisted family secrets literally became the 800-pound grotesquerie in the room, out in the open for everyone, neighbors, strangers, to witness. Your monster, a one-time manifestation of a hideous, dangerous imaginary friend. It's not unheard of to have one-time manifestations of imaginary friends for some as their gift, but yours had to be put down. A little bit of your imaginary friend stayed with you, and a little bit of yours died with it, and a little bit of the ability remained, like an outy belly button to remind one of a past connection, enough to make your dreams sometimes a problematic thing. It shook the family to its core. Nothing was the same again once its mother, I want to ask. Not for you, for sure. It taught you a lesson you passed along to me, saying to me with urgency more than once, from the time I was young, your nails digging into the pale skin of my forearms, urging me to look into your eyes, or while I tucked you in after saving you from your nightmares about men. Always make sure, you warned, that they love you more than you love them. Yes, mother, I would reply, my own urgency increasing with understanding and age, and you would search my eyes and finally let go, satisfied. My eyes go now to the picture of my great grandfather for a moment. I wonder about him, my past. I look back to you. I wonder about you, my present. Do you still think I am your blessing? I ask you. You pause for a moment, the look in your dark eyes, dark like mine, or far away. Pain crosses your expression for a moment. Some memory. Then you look me directly in the eye. Yes. You give a smile that seems fragile. Lest some emotion from others or some happenstance have more right to exist than it. Yes, it was a blessing that your daughter can walk through dreams unscathed and help you heal from yours. You see me smile at you. Your smile gains confidence, draws strength. I rise from the table, give you a quick hug, and head out for work. The familiar smell of books and paper, of leather upholstery, of coffee when someone walks by, memories of waiting rooms, of office interiors, of tests and examinations. Your loose, blonde bun. Your entrance into your office, the hallway clack of high heels muted by contact with carpet, signals the end of my picking at my black sleeves. Our eyes meet. You smile down at me past your glasses as you walk to your desk, a handful of files in hand. You plop down into your leather office chair, plop down the files, plop your hands into your lap with a sound of satisfaction, and look at me, your smile broadening. So, how are you? You ask me. About the same, I tell you. You put a thoughtful finger to your lip chin. About the same. So there's something going on you don't quite want to talk about? You receive confirmation by my uncomfortable expression. Of course you know that. Not only does your gift allow you to get the gist of people's emotions, you taught me to say the very same thing, to counter the torn feeling I get inside when feeling obliged to be immediately honest, yet not wanting to divulge. You incline your head. How's your mother? You ask me gently, softer. She had a nightmare. You nod thoughtfully. Aha. You still treated my mother, knew everything. When my gift manifested, you saw an opportunity to have me work here at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and to eventually work under you. How is she? You ask seriously. She's all right, I say, crossing my legs nervously in the leather couch. A bit ashamed, I think, but mostly none the worse for wear. Reassure her more, you say, your elbow on your desk, your chin cradled between thumb and forefinger. You tap the pen you hold thoughtfully. Okay, the reason I called you to my office is because I have an opportunity. Oh? You continue, letting me know that someone's contacted the department for help in a certain matter, that it would seem someone's son has been in an accident and has been in a coma. It would present a unique opportunity for you to exercise your abilities. You'd be paid handsomely, of course, but you'd have to check in with me rather than come here every day. What say you? Sure, I say. Why not? The end. For now.
Thank you, Tonya. Wow. Lovely, lovely reading. Thank you. Our third reader is Christina Delia. Christina Delia is an affiliate member of the Horror Writers Association, HWA. Her writing has appeared in Shadowy Natures, Unburied, the collection of queer dark fiction, Dark Dispatch, Planet Scum, the Ramones-themed anthology, Gabba Gabba Hey, The Grey Rooms, and Midnight Tales. Christina's body horror poetry collection, Guts, Lips, 55 voracious poems, is out now. Go for it, Christina.
Hi, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. So this is the aforementioned Gabba Gabba Hey that I was thrilled as a punk rock fan to be a part of. And I will read my story. My protagonist, he just came to me. Like sometimes serendipitously it happens. So here we go. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but Mick and I were angrily dividing up our record collection, as is customary at the end of a bad relationship, when that thing he'd been keeping in the basement ran up the slat stairs and into our living room and bit Mick's head off. So I stood there staring at the now ghastly, uneven neck stump of my lover turned hater. Obviously, I was in shock. I'm still in shock. My fiancé is a dead man. I'm next. If a lifetime of slasher movies prepared me for anything, it's don't run up the stairs. The killers that hunt hapless teens in slasher films are slow stalking humans. This creature is a fast-moving mound. It looks like a cross between that ranting brain Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon and Pizza the Hut from Spaceballs. Yes, I'm a child of the 80s, and this is what I get for dating a scientist. I hit the venomous flesh-colored blob in its face, if you can call that regurgitated lunch meat a face, with a bucket. I dump a bottle of Bona on its head. I am meticulous about my honey oak hardwood floors. But as I wildly look around our living room for objects to defend myself with, I realize that everything I fretted about doesn't matter. Hardwood, my injured pride at finding out my man cheated on me, that sham the poets call love, they all seem absurd. How ridiculous to care about anyone or anything other than myself when this world is so clearly about survival. I spy a bottle of Windex next to the coffee table. Grabbing it, I spray that nasty sucker right in his big, solo, off-center, milky white eye. Its dark pupil narrows on me for a second before being temporarily blinded. It howls in muffled agony, sounding like if someone using voice-changing technology had their pinky toe hacked off. This thing has no toes. Tentacles? Sure. Weird body stumps, tumorous lumps, and mush. The thing is a gelatinous lard pile, but it has what looks to be toeless feet with long, pointy, coal-colored talons jutting out of them, like the devil made an unfortunate snowman in Hades. Those hideous puppies would shred a pair of canvas sneakers to bits. Hounds of hell, my dogs are barking indeed. As I am fighting for my life, I think about the hounds of hell, and if they too are going to appear and drag me down, down, down past the basement into a cosmic crawl space where neither God nor anything holy or sacred ever dwelt. The thing's feet stink, and it's not the usual type of foot odor that can be remedied with some baby powder. No, they smell like a cross between festering hamburger and feces. Is that the sickening aroma of rotting flesh? I close my eyes and swallow hard to avoid breathing out of my nose. It breathes on me, and its breath is oddly cold, but just as foul as its foot odor. I shake with chills and sweat, and I silently curse myself for ever allowing Mick to bring this work project into our home. It's harmless. It's science, he laughed, and I just shrugged. What did I know? I wasn't the scientist in the room. The scientist in the room had lost his head. I aim to keep mine, so I push past the behemoth. Oh God, I touched it, my fingers, and run like my life depends on it down the basement stairs like a demon's chasing me. It does. It is. I don't know if the monster sees where I'm headed, but I have no doubt that it can sniff me out with those flared nostril cavities. The vomit goblin. I have never used that phrase before, but wow if it isn't accurate. It looks like Sloth from the Goonies had a baby with an ass pick. The basement is pitch blackness. That's why I refuse to paint down here. I need natural light. I slump shaking on the side of a wardrobe that I wish could transport me to Narnia. I'm a proud gay man, and I'm not going to hide in a closet. I have come too far in my life. I have to kill this thing. I can discern that it's moving around overhead. It was so fast when it was slurping Mick's skull, but now it sounds like it's moving slowly, dragging something. I taste bile, and I know it's dragging Mick's body. Why? Is it a trophy? My dad was a deer hunter. My mom liked to stick pins in butterflies. She amassed quite a collection. I never hurt anyone or anything except for myself. Maybe it's because I was raised by parents who like to hunt down and trap other living things, but I've spent most of my life stuck in bad relationships. I had thought that Mick was different. He had a great career, and he seemed to love me back. Things changed when he brought that thing home from the research lab. It was so small then, the size of my mother's breast cancer tumors before her mastectomy. Yes, she had shown them to me. Yes, she had cried in my arms. I was a caring son. I can be strong for other people when they need me, but I couldn't stay in that house in the wilderness where my dad kept sneering, I know what you are. I know what I am too, a good person, a survivor. But it would be nice sometimes to have someone to hold on to. Like the distance between Mick and me, like Ma's malignant masses, the thing that Mick brought home grew. At first he'd said, James, you're imagining things, but I wasn't. That's what he said about his affair too, until I caught him in bed with Gray from the gym. Jimbo, you can watch, Gray had laughed, and I stood there stupidly. I feel like I'm so good at that, remembering how I thought his name was Gary and how I didn't like him when we first met. I'm usually spot on about people, except my lovers. I have terrible taste in men. Sexy intellectuals with Oscar Wilde wits who take me to the opera and hand me rose-colored glasses. All of the operas Mick took me to were tragedies. I should have known. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christina. Our fourth reader, is Terri Bruce. Terri Bruce writes hard to classify fantasy and science fiction stories that explore the supernatural side of everyday things. She is the author of the Paranormal Contemporary Fantasy Afterlife series, the speculative fiction short story collection Souls, and numerous short stories in various anthologies and magazines. And she happens to be one of the organizers of Strong Women, Strange Worlds, without whom these events wouldn't happen. Go for it, Terri.
Thanks, Sarah. I actually am only going to be reading one piece tonight. When I read the two pieces together, it put me over time. So I will just be reading Making Ghosts tonight, which is my newest piece. It's my first literary acceptance. It's in the Santa Fe Literary Review. Their online version will be available by the end of this month for free, and you can find it on their website if you want to read this story. I will be reading the complete story, though. Making Ghosts. I was 15 when I made my first ghost. No one told me it was so easy and that you have to be careful. I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, I didn't even intend to do it. It just sort of happened, and the thing came out all wrong. It followed me around, sad and listless, made from the grief I didn't know what to do with. It was full of regrets and would-have-beens and lived in the corners like a shadow. Most of the time, I could ignore it, but sometimes I would catch sight of it out of the corner of my eye and be reminded, and annoyed. Later, as time dulled my memories, I made a new ghost. This one was all bright, glittering edges and prismatic rainbows, as unlike my mother as the first one. Daughter, it would say, for how could I call it she? Remember that time we went to the store and I bought you that doll you loved so much? But of course, that's not how it had happened at all. I hadn't loved the doll. I'd hated it the way I'd hated all her I'm sorries. Daughter, do you remember when I took you for that pony ride and we had a picnic afterward? Do you remember when I took you to the beach and we picked up seashells? Do you remember? Its glittering rainbow-colored view of the past was full of sharp edges and cut like broken glass. Grief drifted in the corners, silent as always, a heaviness that made my irritation with rainbows all the keener. The pair of them, stupid and immature. By the time my grandmother's ghost came along, I was out of patience with the other two and had locked them away. Grief I put in a box and stuffed under the bed. Rainbows I trapped in the pocket of a dress I'd bought out of sentimentality but never wore. Grandma wasn't happy. This ghost I had made a little more clear-eyed, a little realer than the rest, and she would shake her head and sigh at me. She kept her counsel, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. That part made me wonder, because my grandmother had never had disappointment in her eyes when she was alive. Eventually, I decided I'd made this ghost wrong too and stuffed her in a pocketbook I left behind when we moved to a new house. It took a few years, but Grandma found me somehow, and she brought grief and rainbows with her. By then, I'd added several more ghosts to my collection because I was so terrible at not making them. A third mother, another grandmother, and a dear friend who was still alive but with whom I'd fallen out of touch and missed. With the arrival of these three, we were now quite crowded. I could hardly move about the house without bumping into one of the ghosts. If they provided any solace, any wisdom, it would have been one thing, but all my ghosts were wrong in one way or another. The originals, but not. In grief, I could see all the best parts, and in rainbows, the worst. Dear friend was full of loneliness, and it made her clingy. She was always underfoot. Second mother and second grandmother ignored me in favor of arguing with each other all the time. They made it hard to sleep because they were particularly loud at night. Why can't I make a right ghost? I asked first grandmother one day. She was the only one I could stand to talk to, even with all her dissatisfaction. Why can't I gather up the right combination of ingredients to make one properly? Where do I keep going wrong? But she was no help. She was made wrong too. She just shook her head and sighed, disappointed once again. Finally, I'd had enough. I collected up all the places I'd put my memories, stray rocks and loose buttons, snippets of songs and lines of poetry, and that corner I kept banging my shin on. I put them in a bowl on my grandmother's desk and kneaded them into my mother's bread recipe, baked the loaf until it was done, and then sat and ate it slowly as I gazed out a window on a summer morning. When I finished, I turned from the window and a new mother stood before me. She smiled, and I knew I had made a proper ghost at last. With quiet efficiency, she got a box, piled in grief and rainbows and all the rest. She folded up the flaps and, without looking back, took them away with her when she left. The end.
Very, very nice, Terri. Thank you. Our fifth reader is Dianne Dotson. Dianne Dotson is the cross-genre author of The Shadow Galaxy, The Inn at the Amethyst Lantern, and the Quest for Song saga series. She's a science writer and artist and also writes as Gendia Gammon. Go for it.
Thank you, everyone. I'm reading The Glove and the Black Lantern in The Shadow Galaxy. And what's interesting about this story is that it is made to be read aloud. Dear listener, a cautionary tale of woe and strange tidings awaits, if you would care to listen to it. But take heed, for if you, wary traveler, wish to sleep as soundly as the soft doves outside your bedroom window, you might recoil from these events that transpired not long ago. It began with a note nailed upon a lamppost, in a rather crude manner, with a rather crude and rusted nail. But no matter. Calliope Windsor saw the notice, and therein the trouble started. Miss Windsor found herself by that very lamppost just recently, mere weeks ago, dear listener. And had decorum and common sense not escaped her at that moment, this tale might not ring with the notes of tragedy and mystery on high. Consider the setting. An afternoon, 4:30, in which Miss Windsor decided upon a shortcut by Orion Cemetery, rather than taking the walk through the park to the quay back to her brownstone. This was an hour in which, in late springtime by the sea, glowed golden upon the edges of the newborn leaves, and when shadows remained periwinkle in hue. In all areas of comportment, Miss Windsor was not in the wrong by taking a detour. She erred, however, in not taking an escort along. The paper, only slightly curled at the corners, clearly had not endured the rains of the prior week, so she could see that it was new, and it had been placed at just the right time and at the right height to catch her hazel eyes, which at the golden hour looked amber flecked with green. What, dear listener, turned her head and caused her to walk that way? We may never know for certain, but whispers tell us perhaps some clues. Something changed Miss Windsor's mind, and as it happens, not only hers. Ellington, the maid of all work in the Windsor home, had seen Miss Calliope off at the post office. Calliope, by the maid's own account, had delivered 3 sealed letters to be mailed. Rather mysteriously, thought Ellington, Calliope had not told her maid what they contained. She had smiled in her dreamy, twisted mouth way, adjusted her gloves, and walked out onto the platform and along the street. Ellington recounted the need to purchase food for the night's dinner, and so bade Miss Windsor farewell. Oh, the tremulous tones of regret Ellington has used since, remembering that instant in its recent crystalline clarity, a clarity only seen in a time of deep regret, when another decision might have meant the difference between seeing Calliope Windsor at dinner that night or never again. You may wonder, what had steered Calliope aside from her track? Did someone urge her? We can only piece together the words of witnesses, of which there are regrettably very few. Aside from the forlorn, and it must be said at times histrionic recollections of that fateful day by Ellington, there are but 3 others who are known to have seen Calliope Windsor. Each tale grows stranger by the telling, as you will hear. I saw her plain as day, declared a fishmonger who, at the behest of the investigator, we shall call Morris, wearing a straw hat, green ribbon and that, and long dress. No, I don't recall the color. Not one for the fineries of ladies, what? The gloves, they were green like the ribbon on the hat, that I know, since she'd left one behind. Upon questioning, Morris insisted that a young woman had walked up to the aforementioned lamppost and taken the sheet of paper nailed to it, but upon pulling the paper off, her glove became stuck by the nail that held it up. She cried out softly, and Morris had turned his head to see what had happened. Are you all right, miss? He had called out. She jumped, turned her head, and slipped him a little smile. She waved with her other hand, which held the paper, but the gloved hand had turned red at the fingertips, presumably from her finger being nicked by the nail. She had looked this way and that, and discreetly let it fall to the ground. Morris later found it and placed it upon the lamppost's neck. Oh, but dear listener, that is not all that happened with that lamp. As Morris touched the glove, stained with blood as it was, and it pressed to the post of the lamp, the panes of the lantern turned pitch black. Being a fisherman, Morris believed staunchly in the tides and in superstition, and he looked to and fro to see if anyone else had noticed the anomaly. He held the glove briefly in his hand, and feeling a deep chill, as he himself admitted, he placed the glove back on the lamppost and retreated to his stall to close up before nightfall. "'Twasn't anything like I'd seen before, and I hope to never again," Morris told the investigator, visibly shaken. Morris had held his hat in his hand, his crinkled purple-red lips twitching under the gray and gold mustache. After being released from his questioning, Morris decided to move his business farther down along the quay and never to return to the lane near Orion Cemetery. And that is not all that happened after the bloody glove touched the lamppost. If Morris had looked down, he would have witnessed something else strange indeed. Tiny black cracks in the cobblestone radiating out from that lamppost like forked spokes on a dark axle. Yet apparently one boy did see the cracks form just as he skipped by, his pocket full of cockles and his ginger hair blazing in the lowering sunlight. I saw her, yeah, he squeaked. I had to get back to me mom, though, didn't I? Else she'd tend my hide, wouldn't she? I saw the lady, yeah, she was real pretty. She looked like a daffodil. This boy, Ralphie, had a mother quite ruddy of face, with frizzled red hair, who stared sternly at him over such a mutinous strain of poetry bursting forth from her son's mouth. Now don't you be getting fancy, Ralphie, she admonished, and the poor lad turned positively scarlet. The investigator pressed the boy gently, and under the wary eye of the mother, who held certain renown for bellowing her son's name every afternoon to be sure he could hear her across multiple blocks, everyone within those blocks could hear her trumpeting lungs as well. Ralphie bit his lip, hands pulsing in his threadbare pockets and legs kicking nervously under his chair. She didn't have nobody with her, sir, honest. The only other person I saw was old Morris. I bought some cockles off him, yeah, and that weren't the oddest thing. Besides her being alone in that, yet with the ground all around there. There was sort of a popping sound, and these little cracks all spread out from the lamppost, even under my feet. She must have seen them too. The mother glared with her eyes squeezed nearly shut, and Ralphie gave a nervous laugh before saying, then the lady went on down along the cemetery, honest. She turned the corner at the end of the block, and that's all I saw of her, yeah. Ralph might have gone cold, dear listener, were it not for the final witness on that unfortunate yet beautiful afternoon. Ralphie had spoken as honestly as he could, despite his outlandish claims of cracks in the pavement, but to be sure, our fair city is known for having a few, if not in quite the same uncanny manner as those, for along the southern side of Orion Cemetery, which, if you recall, was constructed nearly 2 centuries ago, there was a corner flower shop across the street that belonged to Matilda Dewberry. To the east next door, a milliner had closed shop for the day, but Mrs. Dewberry had lingered a bit to attend the shop display and bring in the buckets of flowers that had not sold. To hear Mrs. Dewberry tell it, one Miss Calliope Winsor had turned her corner, holding a piece of paper in her left hand, gloved all in green. Her right hand bore no glove and was balled into a fist. A highly unusual sight for a lady, but Miss Winsor had approached Mrs. Dewberry. I'm terribly sorry, she had said, her face stained in the cheeks with a deep rose, but whether from embarrassment or fever or some unnamed emotion, Mrs. Dewberry could not tell. But I've cut my finger. Have you a ribbon I can bandage my hand with? I don't want to soil my handkerchief. There, dearie, Mrs. Dewberry had told her. Let's have a look and get you patched up. She had gestured for the young woman to enter the shop, but Miss Winsor stood firmly outside. If you don't mind, she had stammered, her eyes darting back down the direction she had come. I have a delicate nose around flowers, though they are most beautiful. I would like to stay outside. Mrs. Dewberry had paused at the strange request, but nodded gently, her hair taut in a gray bun, her solid and boxy build covered in a soft brown apron, lightly streaked with the green dye of plant stems. She brought forth a strip of white muslin and a wet cloth and cleaned the wound. You might want to see that proper set aside, the woman told Calliope. She could not see what was on the paper, as Miss Winsor had turned it face down against her skirt. That struck her as a bit strange. But then Mrs. Dewberry respected others' privacy, unlike some folks along the harbor. It must be said, listeners, that Mrs. Dewberry greatly laments not finding out what the paper held up on it. Dearie, you might want to have that looked at in the morning, Mrs. Dewberry had told her, for the wound was most puzzling. It was a puncture, yet out from it radiated tiny black marks like legs of a spider, with the wound as its body. The muslin bandage covered the puncture, but the black marks emerged from the edges. Was it a rusty nail, dear? Miss Winsor did not look at Mrs. Dewberry, instead said, I don't recall, and her eyes seemed glassy and reflective. Shall I call someone to escort you to a carriage? Mrs. Dewberry asked. No, I'll be quite all right, Mrs. Winsor had said, and patting the bandaged hand gratefully, she'd offered Mrs. Dewberry some coins, but the florist had refused. Thank you for your troubles. I'm headed home. My listeners, I regret to inform you that Miss Winsor did not make it home. She did not make it anywhere, and no one that walked along the path she took has seen her since. And I'll stop there. You'll have to read the rest yourselves.
Oh my goodness. Fantastic reading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final reader is N.D. Jones. N.D. Jones, Doctor of Education, is a USA Today best-selling author who lives in Maryland with her family. In her desire to see more novels with positive, sexy, and three-dimensional Black characters as soulmates, friends, and lovers, she took on that challenge herself. Go for it, Andy.
Thank you very much. In my novel, Barely Gold, and far as what I'll read for you today, Fayola is a veteran soldier. She's on her last mission and nothing goes according to plan. And so instead of rescuing one doctor, she finds herself making a mad dash to the border with 20 war orphans with a group of soldiers following swiftly behind them. So I'll begin. Flying at top speed, Fayola bolted through the sky, eyes and ears alert. She searched for the inevitable. It didn't take long. Gunshots boomed, men yelled, children screamed. Fayola willed her wings to flap faster, harder. They couldn't. They didn't. I said, stop. Fayola lifted higher in the sky as she drew closer to the sound of yelling and crying. More gunfire rang out, heating her blood and sharpening her intent. Bang, bang. Let that be a lesson to you. I said, stop. More crying erupted just as one of the screaming voices went silent. Fayola rushed toward the border. Her keen eyesight spotted 6 Sung-Hung soldiers. 3 rode elephants. Those elephants are larger than the one I disabled earlier. I should have fed from him, but that would have meant transforming, forcing my beak through his tough hide and then praying his disgusting blood would stay down. I didn't have time then. Do I now? Fayola didn't think she did, although her complete Impudulu form was faster and stronger than her hybrid body. She also did not want to frighten the children with her complete bird form. Fayola should not care what they thought of her, but listening to their terrified wails as they raced to the border barrier, she found the thought of the children shrieking at her true nature as distasteful as consuming an elephant's blood. Fayola shifted into her complete Impudulu form, an 8-foot, 200-pound black and white bird with a thick, long beak and tail and partially webbed toes with sharp talons. I might terrify the children, but being alive and frightened is better than being cold and dead. Fayola flapped her large wings. With a 30-foot wingspan, she could generate deadly lightning and deafening thunder. I can't do either, not here, not unless these soldiers leave me with no better options. Fayola swooped toward the men, knocking them off their mounts. Mei Lian and the other children had stopped a couple 100 feet from the border. None of them were in their animal form, and they formed a huddle around something, someone she could not see. A bullet slammed into Fayola. 2, 3, more. She rushed at the shooting bears, smacking them aside with her wings. They crumpled to the ground but staggered back to their feet, bleeding from heads and arms but still in the fight. The 3 elephant shifters charged her, forcing Fayola to retreat to the sky. Bright white lights from the border towers were turned in her direction, taking away the advantage the night sky afforded a black bird. Get up. Fayola spoke in the children's minds, exerting energy she did not have to spare. Get up and get to the barrier entry point. If you don't, we'll all die. Fayola didn't wait for a response. Having a group of weeping children, a flying Impudulu, a shooting bears at the Takala border had created a public scene that went against all of her specialized training. Takala guards leveled rifles at everyone not on their side of the border. Flapping her wings, she released her lightning, striking the tower lights beamed at her. Still, the children hadn't moved. Bang, bang, bang. Fayola dodged the bullets. Bang, bang, bang. Stand down, or we'll turn our weapons on those kids. There will be nothing to stop me from killing all of you if you do. Fayola flew toward the children so fast. She had always been swift, but not today. Not when her speed mattered the most. Bang, bang. The shaggy-haired boy whose name she hadn't bothered to learn no more than she had the names of most of Dr. Perez Soto's children collapsed to the ground. Blood oozed from 2 wounds, head and chest. The first shot killed him. The second was meant as a message to me. The children screamed and cried, but their brutal murder had forced them into motion again. They ran for the border, leaving behind more than one victim of the Sung-Hung soldiers' heartlessness. Fayola finally understood why the children had stopped, who they had been huddling around. A naked boy with long black hair stared at her, unseeing, dead. Ping. Fayola landed beside him. The young elephant shifter had offered her cold water and warm blood. She had taken the former, but denied the latter, yet it still spilled. Not for a pact of protection, but because death was the most heinous cost of war. Wasted blood, a wasted life. Bullets slammed into her back, not sinking in the way they had the children at her taloned feet, but still painful. Spreading wings to their full width, Fayola flew low and directly behind the running children. Then, using her body as a shield, she urged them forward. Jawahir stumbled and fell. With a beak made as much for killing prey as it was for carrying nestlings, Fayola snatched up the 3 youngest children by their jacket collars. They sniffled and cried, but they didn't scream or fight to free themselves from her grasp. Della Eaton, I knew you would come. Jawahir petted the side of her long beak as if she wasn't a bloodthirsty predator. Heavy padded feet hit the ground behind her, and she knew the elephants were on the move. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you so much to everyone who came today.